Okay. Welcome, everyone. Today's event is being hosted by GCAP, the General Contractors Association of Pennsylvania. GCAP is a statewide commercial construction association that represents the memberships of out west. We have the Master Builders Association. Dave Delaquente is with us today. Dave and Eric, who we heard from earlier. Morning, gentlemen.
Morning, Attorney General.
Yeah, it looks like some of their members are with us as well. So that's Master Builders Association in Pittsburgh. In the central part of the state, we have a group that I run called Keystone Contractors Association. And then and our current board president is with us today, John Panzita. Give us a wave, John. There he is.
Hey, John.
All right. And then in your neighborhood, Mr. Shapiro, we have GBCA, General Building Contractors Association, and they are run by Ben Connors, their CEO and president. Good morning, Ben.
Hi, Ben.
Yeah. Morning, Nancy.
Also on Ben's staff is Lance Claiborne, who's with us.
Good morning.
Oh, I forgot Seth Core from the KCA staff is with us. Morning, everyone. Also, before we jump to our host, I also want to point out some other guests that we have on the line here. I believe we have 2 of the 4 employee misclassification task force members. Lance, who you heard from earlier, Lance is one of those 4 private sector people, and joining him is Drew Simpson from the Eastern Atlantic States Carpenters.
Good to see you, Drew.
Carpenters.
Morning, everybody.
So hopefully this morning you guys can give us a update or so on that task force. But without further ado, I think the reason why we're all here, we just want to hear what our Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro has to say and see what he's doing and see how we can be a resource to you and help you in your efforts. So without further ado, thanks.
Yeah, John, thank you very much. And I'm glad that we could get together in this. I wish we were physically together, but I'm glad we could at least get together in this more casual setting. I think we were trying to get together last month and I had a scheduling conflict. So thank you for giving me this time. And I'll tell you what, I'll just make some, brief comments. I'd really like to just get into a back and forth and have a dialogue. I'd like to hear what's on your mind and, react to your reactions or your questions. Before I get into some remarks, I do really want to acknowledge my Chief Deputy Attorney General for Fair Labor, Nancy Walker, and her deputies, Lisa Eisenberg, and I thought I saw Chris Halleck. Oh, there's Chris. Chris just moved on our screen, Chris Halleck. They do terrific work on behalf of the good people of Pennsylvania day in and day out. And, they represent a unit that did not exist prior to my election as Attorney General. I know Drew remembers this. One of the things I talked about back when I was campaigning in 2016 was the need to protect workers better in Pennsylvania and to make sure that we have a level playing field when it comes to competition to build our schools and our roads and our bridges and all other types of contracting and procurement issues like that. It's my firm belief that everyone should want that level playing field, and that everyone should want workers to be treated fairly, paid a fair wage, and working in safe conditions. And of course, everyone wants to walk into a building that's been built by skilled hands and that is safe for them to, to go into. And so I think, this is something that should bind everyone together. And it's with that in mind that, we've been very aggressive in our fair labor section, trying to make sure that we've got a level playing field and trying to make sure that workers are protected. The number one issue I hear about, particularly from the trades, is worker misclassification and wage theft. We have seen that, the number of complaints rise very significantly during our nearly 5 years working together on these issues. And worker misclassification, in my mind, and wage theft in my mind, is just straight up theft. It's theft from the worker. It's theft of honest services. It's theft from other companies that are playing by the rules and not cutting corners. And it's theft from the taxpayers. That's less money going to your local police and less money going to your local parks and trails, et cetera, et cetera. And so again, it comes back to making sure that we've got a level playing field. We've been aggressive in using both our criminal authority and our civil authority to root out wage theft and worker misclassification. You may have heard about some of the more recent cases that we've had. Goodco, for example, where Scott Good, the CEO of that company, actually pled guilty on behalf of himself and his company to several counts of theft and failure to make disposition of funds. This was a case out of Clearfield County. And as a result of that plea, Good is going to pay restitution in the amount of about $65,000 to make up for what was taken. That was an important case for us. Another one was in Delaware County, in the southeastern part of the state. Garcia Ramirez ran a drywall company, and we partnered together in that prosecution with the local district attorney there. We have certain authority as the Attorney General for Act 72 violations. He had authority under our theft laws in Pennsylvania, and we were able to work together to hold them accountable for stealing from their workers, improperly classifying their workers, I should say. And in that case, the individual also pled guilty. And then just about, Nancy, what was it, maybe a week or 10 days ago, we had the Hawbaker case, which was the largest Davis-Bacon wage theft case in the history of the United States. This is a case we worked on for about 3 years, where Hawbaker was engaged in an unprecedented theft from their workers. And really, I would also argue from the taxpayers and from the marketplace. As a result of stealing from their workers through their retirement accounts and through some funny bookkeeping when it came to healthcare, they were able to basically take their workers' money, put it in their own pockets, and then use it to lowball the next bid and the next bid and the next bid so that they could get work from honest contractors who otherwise would have been, in theory, poised to get that work. Like I said, largest case in history. We're talking about more than $20 million stolen from workers. The guys who were doing the backbreaking work on our roads and bridges in Pennsylvania had their money taken by the C-suite executives, put in their pockets, and then denied them the dignity of a day's work and the opportunity to retire when they were supposed to retire. And of course, we know under prevailing wage laws, every dollar of that set wage needs to go to the worker, yet they were simply not doing that. They were using that money to fund their lifestyles and to fund the next bid on the next project. Make no mistake, I've told these workers, we will get them their money back, and we will make sure that Hawbaker is held to account to the fullest extent of the law. And what I also said when we announced those charges, and I think every employer needs to take note, we are watching. We have a unit that knows what they're doing. You have an attorney general who cares deeply about these issues, about protecting workers and protecting a level playing field for honest competition. And while these have been significant cases, Goodco, our Delaware County case, and of course, Hawbaker, sadly, they won't be our last because we're seeing these kinds of cases all across Pennsylvania. And that's sort of where I wanted to, maybe bring the conversation, the one-sided conversation, to an end and engage in a more of a back and forth. And that is your role in this process. In each of these cases, we were able to get a tip. We were able to hear from people who are out in the field, people who saw that the playing field wasn't level, people who saw workers being taken advantage of. And in many cases, those tips were very, very helpful to us. And so what I want you to know, as you go out and compete honestly for work in this Commonwealth, I want you to know that we're here and we want to hear from you. If you see things that don't look right on a job site, if you see things in the bid process that doesn't seem right, or something seems too good to be true, I've learned that if it seems too good to be true, it's definitely not true. Please be in touch with us. Your direct sort of eyewitness accounts of things is very, very important to us as we build these cases. And I want you to know that you can contact Nancy, Lisa, Chris, anybody on our team in a confidential, discreet manner. and it will remain as such unless otherwise noted by you or by us. And so I want you to know our door is open. We are very interested in hearing from you and very interested in making sure that we have an honest level playing field here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That's the right thing for workers. It's the right thing for taxpayers, and it's the law, and we're going to continue to enforce it. So with that, John, I'll turn it back to you. We don't have such a huge group that we have to be overly formal here. I'd love to just have a back and forth. There's lots and lots of other topics, of course, that we can get into, but I did just want to touch on those since I think they're fresh in people's minds. But I'll turn it back to you and look forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for your opening comments there.
Sure.
Any questions from the field, like the AG, small crowd, informal crowd. So feel free to speak up.
Yeah.
Or you could text them in, put them in the chat box. Since we started, we were joined by GCAP President Steve Massero and GCAP Treasurer Bob Leahy.
Great. Hi, Steve. Hi, Bob. Thanks for being here.
John, it's John Panzita speaking. I have a question for Josh. Is it possible that, the Hobbaker case, I believe they're big ABC, Associated Building and Contractors members. Is it possible that this is a tip of an iceberg, that ABC has, kind of as a group has a program, so to speak, that they put together for their contractors and how to do these benefits in a way that is top heavy and benefits the ownership of the companies, similar to what I've read that Hobbaker has been doing. Is it potentially out there that that's kind of a systematic approach that ABC has been coaching maybe their members to do?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, John, and I hope you'll appreciate that I'm not going to react directly to it other than to say, no, and I'm not trying to be flippant at all. I very much respect your question and you and the work you do. I can tell you that we have a number of ongoing investigations, and we're looking at a lot of different things. And certainly, if you or anyone else on this Zoom have information that you want to share with us that you think would be helpful as we look at different things, we would welcome that.
And if I could, I did put my contact information in the chat box space, so feel free to reach out to me directly if you have any information you'd like to share.
Thanks, Nancy.
I don't have any specific knowledge, but it just seems to me that, it's possible that that's kind of, I know that ABC has some sort of an apprenticeship program, and they have a different way of approaching benefits for their members. And it just seems to me that it's potentially out there. Yeah. And I understand you can't say anything, but
yeah, no, we've made clear, I mean, you can have all the different approaches in the world, but 100 cents on that prevailing wage dollar needs to go to the worker. And so if somehow that's not happening, that's against the law. And we will go after that wherever we find it. Ben, I think you were going to jump in.
Sure. Well, first, thank you again for joining us and the action you're taking here. It's meaningful. We appreciate seeing it. The thing I was wondering, and I'll confess, part of my origin story was Wage and Hour for L&I in New Jersey, and there they have a pretty robust disbarment list.
They do.
Especially when compared to the one we have in Pennsylvania. From an administrative standpoint, do you ever look at the case that you just built and the action that was just taken, and seeing that as something that should be tied to administrative action to prevent contractors from, because correct me if I'm wrong, they can still bid public work right now. In the case of Hallberg, I haven't seen them on the disbarred list yet. And so it seems like there may be a disconnect from the action that your office is taking, which is admirable, from what the administration follow-up could look like to more soundly root out bad actors in the industry.
Ben, you really, that's a terrific question. And so let me take a couple minutes and dive into that. unlike in New Jersey, where you have a more centralized sort of integrated process between law enforcement and the regulators, we really don't have that here. And so in theory, and I have no idea if they're bidding, Ben, but just in theory, sure, they could bid tomorrow, right? Because my office doesn't have the authority over the regulatory side of things. L&I does. And now I can tell you that they are aware of what we did. They can be informed by what we did, but they make an independent judgment. It is not one that is made by me or by my office. We also see on the criminal side a little bit of decentralization, which I think is also a little bit challenging. So for example, in that Delaware County case that I referenced, that was the drywall case. My office handled the Act 72 violations, which are misdemeanors, right? But we partnered with the district attorney there because they had original jurisdiction over the theft case, which is a felony. And obviously, we want to prosecute these folks to the fullest extent of the law. So it required us to work together with the DA, which is fine with us. We don't mind doing that. But my point is, in that scenario, you've actually got three different sort of governmental entities involved. You've got the DA, the AG, and then you've got whatever L&I is ultimately going to do. And I think that is, I would imagine, frustrating for all of you. I think it doesn't protect workers as well as it could. And I do think that there needs to be more centralization to both the regulatory side and the criminal jurisdiction. I don't necessarily want to take anything away from a DA, but if we could have concurrent jurisdiction, meaning we would also have jurisdiction over some of the theft issues, and if the Act 72 violations in some cases could be raised to felonies, I think that would go a long way toward really being able to root this out. And then, of course, having more of a direct link with L&I would help. Obviously, we have a very strong working relationship with L&I, thanks to Nancy and Lisa and Chris and others. But I would argue, and I think Nancy would agree, that's more sort of personality driven, right? Everybody gets along really well, and so we can share information and work really well together. You could imagine you'd have an administration in Harrisburg where the staff in the AG's office and the staff in the governor's office didn't get along, right? I'm not suggesting I hope that would happen, but you could see that happening. And so if the laws aren't sort of requiring or fostering that level of collaboration, I think that's ultimately not a great thing for workers. And I'd rather see us have more of a New Jersey model when it comes to the the integration of all the partners around the table. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Hey, Josh, Steve Massaro, again, thank you for being on this call and meeting with us. We really appreciate that.
Of course.
A question about in the city of Pittsburgh, was just announced, the mayor had a press conference about kind of undocumented workers coming into the city, working in areas that you've never typically seen, kind of like Amish or piece labor type of thing. How does that work? I know the city is now focused on, I think a great effort has been made by the carpenters union in our area to bring it to the everyone's attention. But does that then, do you let that go on a local level, or do you get involved at some point on something like that?
Sorry, Steve, let me speak over you. Yeah, that's more of an L&I issue and a local jurisdiction issue. But Nancy, I know you've gotten some calls on this kind of stuff. Do you want to speak to that?
Sure. And Steve, we actually, the carpenters and the folks involved in the Pittsburgh task force kindly invited our office, though we weren't part of that initial task force ordinance. We joined, as Drew can attest, we were, I think, at every meeting. So we were able to sort of listen to some of the issues. And as Josh said, sort of the enforcement of the labor things from a state agency level, misclassification is often labor and industry, because they're the ones that are sort of able to get investigators onto the work site. One of the takeaways, though, from that task force was our communications with the district attorney's office in Pittsburgh, in Allegheny County. We were able to sort of chat about what it might look like where we could, work together on an appropriate case. And that actually were sort of the seeds of the task force, or the pilot program that Josh talked about a moment ago with the district attorney's office in Delaware County. So there are opportunities for us to work together on criminal cases, but as Josh said, really the boots on the ground are labor and industry. And at the end of the day, the issue is not so much the workers that are being used by these folks who engage in misclassification, the labor brokers. They're trying to make a living, and they're really not the target. It's the folks that are exploiting them and taking advantage of the system and underbidding the contracts. So that's really at the level that we're looking at. So we try to be mindful of cases that might be appropriate for criminal enforcement, but otherwise they do go to the agent in labor and industry.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I would also just add, I mean, some of these cases, I'm not speaking about anything specific to what you raised, Steve, but generally speaking, some of them have a human trafficking element to it that, we've been interested in, sort of coming at this from a different angle, and our criminal folks have been looking at those cases as well.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning, Josh. This is Dave Dacqualante with the Master Builders Association. Thanks for joining us today and sharing the time. So this question would be a little bit broader, and if you are capable of sharing your opinion on it, I guess I'd love to hear your thoughts about the ballot amendment question related to the emergency declarations. Obviously, our industry was shut down last March, and we put together collaboratively, a plan and documented how we were going to operate safely, and that we could do that in the face of a pandemic. But I just wonder your perspective on what that might mean for the future and indications for our industry or others like it.
Sure. Look, I think there's sort of two issues you raised, Dave. One is, did the governor and his administration sort of handle the shutdowns as best as they could in the face of a pandemic that we really didn't know anything about a year ago? Obviously, we know a lot more about it now. And then the second part of the question is, should we transfer some authority over, pandemics and other emergencies to 253 politicians in the State House and State Senate? And so I'll give you my thoughts. I'm going to be voting no on that constitutional question. I think the idea of putting some of those lawmakers in charge is not one that is going to work to the benefit of the people of Pennsylvania. I think you need to make these decisions in a centralized way. Now, would I've made decisions differently? Sure. And I think certainly the benefit of hindsight here allows us to imagine what things would look like if, God forbid, another pandemic came along, or one of these variants, kind of jumped the vaccine and put us back at square one, which God knows I hope does not happen. But I don't think that is a stretch to imagine that we might find ourselves in a public health emergency again. And so I just think, generally speaking, the executive of a city, of a commonwealth, of a county is better situated to deal with those emergency situations as opposed to a legislative body, particularly the one in Harrisburg. And so my view is that amendment would not help us deal with these emergencies. It would complicate things. And my other view is I think we've made some mistakes that we need to learn from in the future. I'll be talking a lot more about these issues in the coming months, but generally speaking, those are my thoughts, Dave. I can't hear you.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, that's what happens today. You try to unmute and you can't do that. So thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Any questions here?
Josh, are you allowed to talk about your future plans?
I'll tell you what, let's put a pin in that and talk about it some other time. We're on a governmental Zoom here, so.
Okay.
Thank you for your interest, though.
Well, I think because of the recent cases with Good and Hallbaker, I think your office might see more outreach from the contractors.
Good.
Because for years, and correct me if I'm wrong, Drew, but it seems like labor did a lot of the tips and a lot of the outreach, and contractors were kind of frustrated because we know who the bad actors are. And for years, the common sentiment was, well, I can report this or say this, but nothing's happening anyways. You know, they've been doing it for years. And so I think that with the action, you're going to see probably more outreach. And I'm sure we could go around the room here and people could name off contractors that perhaps should be watched, you know. But with that in mind, what is the best way to voice these issues?
Sure.
Get the word out there.
Yeah, I'm going to give a few thoughts and turn it to Nancy, because I want her to walk you through what would be helpful for us to get from you when you reach out. But, you know, one of the things that frustrated me and Nancy and our team is just hearing over and over again from contractors who would express that frustration that you're talking about, John. And then everybody would just kind of say, well, that's the cost of doing business in Pennsylvania. You know, a little slap on the wrist, you pay a small fine and you move on and you keep bidding on, you know, on different projects. And to me, that is not acceptable. You know, it can't just be the cost of doing business. There has to be a real penalty when you screw over the taxpayers and workers and, you know, cheat the system. And so, you know, for us, we take these tips very seriously. We want to hear from you, and we take these issues very seriously. Now, I've also had a number of folks come to me and say, contractor, you know, XYZ is terrible. And I'll say, okay, well, why are they terrible? Well, they just suck. And then they move on. I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't make a case for us. What we really need is to understand why you think that, and specifically what's happening, so that we can go and chase it down. Or if it's not our agency's responsibility, so that we can get it to the proper folks at L&I to chase it down. So Nancy, do you want to take a minute or two and explain, you know, what is helpful for us to get when all of you feel frustrated and want to express how much you don't like a contractor? Nancy, you want to talk about that?
Sure, thanks. Happy to. So I guess the things that are most helpful for us, as we were saying earlier, we are criminal enforcement on most of these issues as opposed to civil enforcement, which is our friends over at Labor and Industry. So the cases where it must be so, it must be that somebody's violating the law, like somebody drew to our attention, redacted certified payrolls, they only have laborers listed, but there's a brick wall built, right? Or, you know, it must be that there was misclassification because you know, the wall came up and it must have been somebody other than labor that put it up. That's not going to be enough for us. We need to talk to one of the laborers who was putting the brick wall up and was, you know, literally classified as a laborer. So for us, and the reason is, you can call Labor and Industry and call Brian Smolik or one of our friends over there and say, listen, it must be so that there was a violation, and they can send an investigator out and ask questions because they do civil enforcement. For us to be able to get onto a work site and grab documents and start interrogating or asking questions of people, we need to convince a judge that we have probable cause to believe that a crime was committed. So the difference is sort of the direct evidence, right? Being able to talk to a worker or a bookkeeper or somebody who was actively involved in some kind of a scheme that resulted in a violation. So that could be anything from, you know, using wrong materials when they've won a contract, a public contract. It could be misclassifying workers in a prevailing wage job. It could be that folks, you know, sort of this Hawbaker scheme where money's being diverted, not being put into, you know, not being put into funds as the certified payrolls are representing. And it really is, you know, a lot of these contractors that are violating the law aren't winning bids because they're radically under the radical low bidder, where everybody's eyebrows go up and say, how could this possibly be? Folks that are doing this are really smart at bidding jobs, so they're a little under the radar. They just bid enough under that they get the contract. And then whenever they save on wages, as all of you know, it's your big pocket item, right? They're able to come in and get these jobs. So anytime that you have direct evidence, so real people involved with real documents and real experiences that can talk to us, that's what we're really looking for. Happy to, you know, answer any specific questions, but generally that's the kind of evidence that we need to be able to go at a case from a criminal perspective.
Excellent, thank you. And then a part two of that is Is there a role for the industry, contractors, and labor to help out with the employee misclassification task force? And perhaps that's a question for four of you, Josh, Lance, Nancy, and Drew. Is there a way that we can help and assist you guys in that effort?
I'd really be interested in your thoughts, Lance or Drew, for you, sort of your takeaway so far from the task force, which, by the way, I think has been, I wonder if you guys agree, I think it's been really a good opportunity for us to all sort of get on the same page and hear what we all do and how we can work together. And I think this is the first time really in the history of our state where we've all had a chance to sort of be at the table together. So Lance or Drew, your thoughts, I'd love to hear too.
Sure, I'll jump in. I think, excuse me, I think part of what you just explained, Nancy, is a big part of it in terms of what's the language, what are the call signs, what are the things that are useful information-wise, because I think a lot on our side, the conversation, we just kind of know when it's there. It's kind of the feel that people who bid constantly on a regular basis, they know when something's off, when they keep seeing the same names. But how do you translate that from that feeling to some real action on the part of your side with bringing those. So that's one. And then two, I've been fortunate enough to hear Attorney General Shapiro talk about this a couple times. And he mentioned one person, I'm not sure if you can in this format, but one employee from Hallbaker who literally was the person that gave the information, who said, hey, my numbers or what should be in my retirement didn't match up. So like those types of instances are very helpful for at least contractors that we work with every day to kind of understand what is it that's tangible information that can then be passed over or that needs to be passed over to result in more cases like this. Oh, and a level playing field.
Yeah, and I'll just jump on to jump in on what Lance was talking about. It's very difficult, especially for contractors, because you don't have the capabilities other than hearsay possibly or something like that to be on job sites. We probably have more council representatives in the state of Pennsylvania than Department of Labor and Industry has in investigators, and that right there is a sad statement. When Labor and Industry only has in the mid-20 investigators for the state of Pennsylvania, and there's 67 counties in the state of Pennsylvania, you can see what type of they're behind the eight ball, especially when they have 13 laws that they have to look after. But we're on job sites every day. Our council representatives, union and non-union, and we see and we hear what's going on. And, there have been times where we have had cases that we thought were on a silver platter and were turned over to the Department of Labor and Industry, and, we missed something or there wasn't enough, whatever it is. But as far as the contractors on this call go, these task force meetings are open to the public. And I believe they're the fourth Friday of every month at 10 o'clock. If you go on the Department of Labor and Industry's website, there is a link for the meeting. So I would suggest that, if you have the opportunity to jump in on a couple of them, I know this Friday is our next one, and I know there's a presentation from some of the people from the Pittsburgh task force, PowerPoint presentation, which is an awful good presentation just to give some background on what's going on. And really for those contractors that are signatory with the carpenters, please reach out to us. If you don't have a means to do something, then I'm sure that we have a means to do something or have the capabilities. But what Attorney General Shapiro and his team have done in a very couple of years here has been monumental. When Act 72 was brought into law in 2011, we all knew that was a first step. But look at where we are here in 10 years later. 10 years later, we have full-blown tax fraud. We have full-blown labor brokers where they are paying their people out with a briefcase full of cash. Best case, they're paying them with a check that doesn't have a pay stub, so there's no taxes. And I know from my years of being an estimator for one of our signatory general contractors, when you have to put 30% for insurance and taxes on the bottom of your labor costs, and another contractor doesn't, you're out of the ball game right there. So that's one of the, and I think that number is still pretty good. At least it is here in northeastern Pennsylvania. Just think, I mean, when you try to put real numbers on this and you talk to people about level playing field and what is a level playing field, 30% on top of your labor costs for insurance and taxes. That right there is, I mean, again, back in my days of an estimator, I mean, you lose jobs by $100, $200, $300. But 30% on top of your labor costs, you're never going to get that job. And, a part of the task force and, what we have been tasked to do is to suggest legislation. This is a 2-year task force. And at the end of the term of this task force, they wish us to present legislation to the legislators on what we think we can do here. Most of these contractors, the labor brokers that we see anyway, are in the interior systems portion of it. You have a general contractor who subs it to an interior systems contractor who then subs it to a labor broker. And we need legislation that tier 1 and tier 2 contractors also have some skin in the game here. When they walk away scot-free with nothing being done to them, and I know there's conversations that are had occasionally about, well, we need to train the tier 1 contractors a little bit on what misclassification really is. If you see 4 10-person vans making 5 trips to your job site and people are getting out of these vans and going to work, it doesn't take a genius to figure out where they're coming from and what they're doing. So, those are all things that we need to look at and what things that we need to do. But as Nancy said, the task force has gotten off to a great start. We'll be in our 4th meeting again on Friday. It's great hearing from the Department of Taxation and the Department of Revenue and the AG's office and the Department of Labor and Industry to be able to see how they work together, and they do work together great. And, with legislation that needs to be changed, I mean, we need to get the Attorney General's office some more legislation. When the Department of Labor and Industry is in reality, the only agency that has any say in this or legal, capabilities of doing something, and you look at when Act 72 was formed, for a first offense, it's $1,000 penalty. For every offense after that, it's $2,500. These labor brokers are making a ton of money, and these unscrupulous contractors are making a ton of money. $1,000 and $2,500 for every time after that. That's a part of doing business with these people. So that's all these things. Sorry, I took a lot of time there, but just wanted to throw that stuff out. And thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
And if I could just emphasize that point that Drew just made about we're being tasked with suggesting legislative changes. And because it is a public meeting, there's a dialogue, a time at the end where people can speak and say what they think would be helpful. That's critically important because, as Drew said, all of these points of view we hope to take into consideration with the recommendations at the end of the term. So really, I encourage you guys to listen in on a meeting or two just to be able to get your point of view on record. And if you have ideas, to make sure that they are being considered as part of the recommendations.
Excellent. Thanks to each of you for that feedback. And a third member, I don't think she joined us, but Joanne Maginella from the Laborers Union was going to try and jump on today, but I don't see her listed. And then the 4th member, we don't say his name, so I won't say it publicly. No, but I found today extremely helpful. I know myself and Dave out at Master Builders and Ben in Philadelphia. We're always telling contractors, you got to speak up, you got to, pass the tips on, get the resources out there, or get the word out there. And, it definitely sounds better coming from you, Mr. Shapiro. So thank you.
I'm just here to amplify your voice, man.
Yes. But yeah, any last questions? Anything else? I know we all have busy days.
Well, I appreciate your time very much this morning. I got to hit the road and get to Harrisburg, but I appreciate the work you guys are doing to help try and create a level playing field. Keep us posted, get the word back to Nancy and our team. If you see something, say something, and hopefully we'll see each other in person real soon.
Absolutely. And before we close, I just want to say thank you very much to Nancy for putting this together. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Great.
Great to see everyone.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.